Tales of Hearts was originally released as a DS title on December 18th, 2008. The game was released with two different versions, the only difference being that one featured animated cutscenes like the rest of the games in the series, and the other with computer-generated ones in a style similar to the CG cutscenes seen in many Final Fantasy titles. This marked the first and last time a Tales game has ever had CG cutscenes. For those that don't know, there are two different Tales development teams, one called Team Symphonia, who have developed most of the 3D titles, and Team Destiny, who have been responsible for many of the 2D entries in the series, most of which have never been released outside of Japan. Tales of Hearts was meant to be a celebratory title as it marked the first time both teams collaborated on a single project. It was also the first time that the Tales studio developed and produced their own portable entry to the series. Tales of Hearts has a combination of classical elements seen throughout the series, like 2D sprite-based visuals, and some sensibilities of the 3D games, such as roaming enemies. The game also featured cameo appearances of the characters throughout the series who were used for special attacks. The overall game was excellent, and had I played it prior to making my top 6 Tales games video, it would have definitely made it somewhere on there. If you haven't seen that, click right here to check it out. Unfortunately, despite fairly strong sales and great critical reception, the original Tales of Hearts remains to this day Japanese only, although there is currently a fan translation underway. In the October 2012 Weekly Shonen Jump, a remake of Tales of Hearts was announced for the PlayStation Vita after being heavily hinted at in another Vita remake, Tales of Innocence R, which is again a Japanese exclusive. Tales of Hearts R released in Japan on March 7th, 2013. Then April 2014, after much Western demand, Namco Bandai finally announced that Hearts R would be coming westward later that year. So, that brings us to the November 11th English release of the game. Is Tales of Hearts R the next revolutionary step forward in the series, and how does it compare to its DS counterpart? Let's find out. Normally, I discuss the story first, but I really want to address the major differences between the original DS game and this Vita remake first. Being a remake, Tales of Hearts R is significantly different from the original version. It has a few Tales standard remake features like new playable characters, more skills and arts, as well as updated visuals. But in the case of Hearts R, the game is a complete remake, with the game being fully 3D, battle system and all. Now, at first when I heard this, it rubbed me the wrong way, as the whole purpose of the original was to celebrate the series and its 2D style was meant to pay homage to the series' roots. So as such, I felt that making the remake 3D almost defeated the purpose of the original game. As well, the battle system has undergone some fairly significant changes, and as someone who really enjoyed the original battle system, I was skeptical to say the least. There is also the issue of localization, as Tales of Hearts R is the first game in the series to not receive an English dub. Instead, the game's dialogue is still in Japanese with subtitles underneath. I don't necessarily have a problem with this means of localization, although I was concerned after Sword Art Online Hollow Fragment's disastrous localization, which was also published by Namco and was similarly sub-only. So, with all that in mind, let's talk about Tales of Hearts R's story, as is the first time I've formally understood it despite playing the original, as I'm not fluent in Japanese. Tales of Hearts R begins in the small seaside town of Seaville, with our hero Core Meteor sparring with his grandfather, and herein lies my first issue with the localization. In the original Tales of Hearts and the Japanese version of Hearts R, Core's name is Shing Meteorite, and seemingly for no explicable reason, his name has been changed in this localization. Now, I wouldn't normally take issue with this, but since the game has only Japanese audio, his name is always spoken as Shing, which is just incredibly baffling and weird. It just takes me out of every cutscene or touching moment when they call him by a different name. This localization problem can also be seen throughout the game's dialogue. An example of this being when a character would say something like, "Oh, thank goodness you're okay," but the localization text would say something along the lines of, "Man, I'm sure glad you didn't fall off that cliff, thank goodness you are okay." It makes sense in a translation and localization context, but since we can hear how different the changes are, it can lead to some very distracting moments and make the game's localizations feel cheap. This is more of a personal issue and nitpick than that of a critique, but I felt it was worth mentioning as it did impede some of my enjoyment from the game's story. Anyway, Core later finds an unconscious girl who happens to be the game's female lead, Kohaku Hearts. And yes, that is her name. After a brief, albeit creepy misunderstanding, Core discovers she is looking for his grandfather, who is a Soma master. Soma are weapons that are created from a person's spiria, which is the embodiment of someone's emotions, kind of like, I don't know, metaphorically speaking, a heart. After meeting up with Kohaku's brother Hisei, the group is attacked by a witch whom has been pursuing the Heart siblings. This encounter leaves Kor's grandfather fatally wounded and damages Kohaku's Spiria. Kor then decides to go inside her Spiria through the use of his Soma in order to restore it. However, instead of fixing it, Kohaku's Spiria is instead fractured, with each split piece being sent across the world. Without her Spiria, Kohaku becomes an emotionless husk, and as such, Kor and Hisei begin a journey to find each piece in order to fully restore her heart. I meant Spiria. The first half of the game's narrative is spent traveling from town to town, finding each piece and meeting new party members along the way, which is pretty standard Tales fare. Overall, the game's story centers around themes like love and the strength of bonds between hearts, and this being the case makes the game's story very cheesy, and it will definitely not be everyone's cup of tea. I personally wasn't very impressed by the overall story. It felt far too familiar to stories of the previous games, and I don't feel it did enough to separate itself. That's not to say there aren't any interesting moments or that the overall narrative is objectively bad, it's just too familiar for a longtime fan such as myself. Let's put it this way, if you really didn't like the story in Tales of Graces, I have no doubt you'll hate the story here. But Tales games aren't known for having revolutionary stories. It's all about the characters, and like most entries in the series, the cast is very likable and well developed. But like the story, each character kind of falls into a niche and come off as seeming like characters from previous games. Despite that, I still think that the game's cast is one of its better merits, and there is tons of fun and humor filled throughout the banter between them. Special mention to Tales of Hearts R exclusive character Gal Gruner, as he has been woven in nearly perfectly with the main story and was easily the coolest cat in the party. His words, not mine. Now, from a gameplay standpoint, Tales of Hearts R is very much the same console RPG experience you'd expect from the series, now on the go. However, that isn't to say that the game is as good as its recent console brethren, but it's pretty close. Like other Tales titles, Hearts R will have you go through the typical formula of town, dungeon, town, with little to do in between. Unfortunately, this is slightly impeded by the fact that battles now occur randomly, which is something I found completely and utterly disappointing. I'm not gonna lie, I hate random battles, which is why I love this series, as it typically tends to avoid them. But having them here really makes going through some of the dungeons a drag. However, in the game's favor, the encounter rate is fairly lax. Battles themselves should be immediately familiar to anyone with any experience with the 3D titles, specifically the Exilia games, as the battle system is near identical. As per usual, you'll be stringing together basic attacks with various arts, although Hearts R has a much larger focus on air juggling enemies, with characters having the ability to instantly warp to enemies that are suspended in air. The overall system is fun to use, although it is very different compared to the original Tales of Hearts battle system, and in my opinion is a bit of a step down. For fans of the series, the game plays and controls exactly as expected, which is a good thing. Again, like the Exilia games, Hearts R is a new type of character progression in the Soma system. Whenever a character levels up, they are awarded with an increasing amount of SBP, which are points that you allocate up to 6 different areas, with each increasing different stats as you pour points into them. Upon clearing a specified threshold, you'll level up that area and receive either new arts, skills, or weapons for your characters. I personally found the Soma system to be one of the stronger aspects of the game, as it stands as one of my favorite level up systems I've seen in a while, as it gives you complete freedom to build your party members as you see fit. Overall, I would describe the gameplay as fun, but very familiar. The game's soundtrack is pretty damn good, with catchy and upbeat set of tunes that more on one occasion got stuck in my head, which is little surprise given the list of contributing composers for the game, with the likes of Hiroshi and Shinji Tamura, Kazuhiro Nakamura, as well as series veteran Motoi Sakuraba. A good chunk of the soundtrack does consist of remixes from the original game, which is to the game's benefit, as I enjoyed these remixes more than the new songs included. The voice acting being Japanese is rather hard for me to judge, but based on what I've heard, it's all high quality stuff. Each voice suits each character perfectly, and there's tons of voice acting throughout the game. Aside from my issue with the localization I mentioned earlier with Kor or Shing's name, I'd say the game's audio is one of its better aspects overall. On the whole, I did enjoy my time spent with Tales of Hearts R, just not as much as I did with the original DS version. I'd best describe Hearts R as painfully average for a Tales game. There are no real glaring issues aside from having random battles or the bizarre localization decisions, but the game also doesn't do anything to really make it stand out from the rest of the series either. As a longtime fan of the Tales series, I give Hearts R a cautious recommendation at best. If you're looking for a console-quality Tales game on the go, Hearts R should serve that purpose well. Similarly, if you're just looking for a solid RPG on your Vita, you can't go wrong either. But if you're someone who's just out to play all the games in the series or a hardcore fan, I'd honestly just recommend waiting for either a sale or a price drop. If you are fully fluent in Japanese or perhaps looking for a game to import, I'd recommend the DS Tales of Hearts over this one, provided you can get past the language barrier. The game can be enjoyed on both the Vita and PlayStation TV and is available digitally in the PlayStation Network. However, the physical game is a GameStop/EB Games exclusive if you want to go that route. Well, that's all for now, folks. The Tales of Retrospective will resume with the release of Tales of Zestra, which will hopefully release in English at some point this year. As always, has been Darren the Gaming Pilgrimage. Till next time. Hey everyone, thank you so much for your patience over the past 2 months. School was absolutely nuts in November and this game came out, so the review got long delayed. I had half the script written for probably about 2 months. I just never got the chance to record anything because I didn't have a Vita TV yet, and then I had to get an HDMI splitter to bypass the stupid HDCP, and so that's why this review is so delayed, and there's a ton of terrible things that happened to me and my family in December that really took a long time to work through and to get the house running again so I could actually get recording reviews and being on top of my game. But that's all said and done, so now reviews and the Fire Emblem playthrough thing will resume at some point near this month, end of this month. It'll be out there. And then things will go as normal. I got 2 other reviews already scripted and most of the footage recorded, so there should be at least a video out every week or every 2 weeks in terms of review-wise. And I can't thank you guys enough for the support you've given me over these past 2 months. It's just been incredible. Thank you so much. See you next time, guys.